It's no secret that at Branducopia, we love stories and truly believe in the power of connection. We take a story-led approach to basically everything we do at Branducopia, including these interviews. As we are very excited to speak to today's guest, who also approaches her communications with a storytelling lens. Welcome to Branducopia, Jess. We're so excited to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Jess, you are Perth-based. You're a Perth-based brand and media strategist who specializes in travel and hospitality spaces. Jess helps businesses to find their story, write their story, and tell their story in brand speak, creates brand strategies, is a copywriter, and can also develop and execute PR and media campaigns. Is there anything we've missed?
No, I think that's about it. Unless I'm not sure. So yes, definitely specialise in travel, food, and wine, and particularly passionate about West Australian businesses in those industries. So yeah, love to work with WA businesses and really niche down in that space. So
to start off, Jess, congratulations on 6 months of Jess Foley Communications.
Thank you.
We know that you've got extensive experience as well. I think I read somewhere that like London,
London Zoo,
London Zoo and the like. But so we know that you've freelanced as a comms consultant for like years. And so the first question to ask you is, what prompted you to move into Jess Foley Communications, branching out out on your own?
Yeah, I mean, as you sort of said, I had been freelancing for a couple of years and doing a lot of copywriting and sort of bits and pieces of everything. Obviously, comms is such a broad field. But yeah, I think the reason really was because I wanted to sort of start speaking more to my people and attracting the sort of clients that I really want to work with, which I wasn't doing. I was operating entirely off word of mouth, which is fantastic. But the thing with operating entirely like that, I wasn't telling my story in any way or putting out there who I really was and what I could do for the people I wanted to work with. So it kind of really was to be telling my story and to be attracting those tourism and hospitality businesses to me. That was why it was like I really wanted to niche down in that area and be a bit more, I guess, choosy about the work I was taking on.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think WA, as a fellow WA person, it's always exciting to help elevate those kinds of businesses in travel, food, and wine. I mean, it's good for the soul, right?
Absolutely.
So just what was the process like of branding for you and that lead up of, you've obviously decided you're going to do Jess Foley Communications, and that process, having knowledge of, that whole branding side of things?
It was super exciting. I had the most fun working on, my own project. I obviously been in this space and being like a brand strategist myself, I did have a very clear idea going into this. I knew, who I was, what my vision was, the values, how I wanted to appear, how I wanted to make my clients feel. But it was all sort of just up here in my head. I had sort of a document written out too, but largely existed in my head. But it was all there. And then when I started to bring in some of those, key people to work with me and help me bring that vision to life, like my brand and web designer and photographer, it just was super easy because I was so clear on what the vision was. It was amazing to get other people's eyes on it too, and for them to, say, yes, we totally get this. It's that tick of approval. I sort of needed to then really get going with it. But it made that super easy that then when I saw the first versions of my logo and I saw the website and, spoke to my photographer, it was like they'd kind of been in my head and just there was, even though I didn't really know what it looked like, as I said, I'm more a wordsmith than I am visual. So I didn't know what the logo looked like or what my brand colors were, anything like that. But as soon as I saw them, I was like, yes, that is exactly what it should be. And I think that really came down to that I had such a clear strategy to basically hand to the designers, on a platter. And it paid off.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like the clarity that you had in order for others to execute. It's really cool. And so how did your own rebrand or your branding process inform like how you approach brand strategy for your clients? Because it's like, for example, if I do branding for myself or for a project for myself, you must become more heightened and self-aware of what your client goes through. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously it really hit home for me how important or how beneficial it is to have that strategy in place, because it made things so smooth for me. But I think, it made me very understanding. There's nothing quite like being on that end of, a project yourself. And when it is your business baby, the sort of stress that comes down to that. And I often said to even though I'm in the industry, I would say to my photographer or web designer, like, I must be your worst client because I'm had so much feedback, like, good feedback, but when it's your own business, your eyes are so on it. So it's definitely gave me a bit of understanding about what people are feeling when they're really going through that process. And so I'm working with a client now and I'm always like, there's no silly questions, like ask me anything, give me all the feedback. Like that's how we get, to what you really want. So definitely made me very understanding.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really
brilliant.
cool.
Having the shoe on the other foot can really change perspective. Is there anything
definitely
that
made me very patient, I think, to be like, yes, like, they need that time to look at it and, so definitely.
Brilliant. So as a brand strategist and a PR expert, could you give us some of your favorite types of briefs that you receive from clients, or where that specialty lies for you?
Yeah, so getting a brief from a client, particularly when I've been working as a comms consultant recently, and doing a lot of copywriting, it really is having that strategy. I'm going to be like beating on about it, but it does make things so much easier. Otherwise, they are all the questions I'm going to be asking, like, okay, who is your target audience? Like, who am I writing this for? What's the purpose of this piece? That just makes a brief so much easier. I mean, I don't need to have a big the whole shebang, a massive 30-page document on what your brand strategy is. I mean, if you've got it, cool, but definitely don't need that. But at a minimum, like, a bit of background, what's the objective of this piece of work, who's the target audience, what are the key messages that we want them to know, and what's the tone of voice. And I can obviously help sort of flash that out. But if you've got that work already done, then that makes things a lot quicker and easier.
Nice. So what does that process look like for when it comes to like creating that copy and building that up for your clients?
If I get a brief like that where it's all that
it's like
foundation, all that foundational work is done, then that's, more or less we might have a quick sort of like a briefing session just to, I think, it's always good to either get in a room or if not in a room on the phone with someone, and a lot quicker and easier than sending a mountain of emails to each other. So we might have a little session, but otherwise it's just, in a copywriting brief, just getting me in a room, working my magic once I know what the objective is and what they want me to do with that piece of work. It's really, letting me sort of bang that out. And then when the brief is really good then too, it often means that there are very few, if any, second, third rounds or anything like that. It's often, one and done, which is amazing as well.
Oh, that would be like the ideal, right?
I think that's the power of that having that really good brief and that strategy in place is then when you get the work, it's like, well, you're in this same frame of mind, everyone's speaking the same language, and it makes things a lot quicker and easier rather than getting a piece of work where then you're like, oh, that actually wasn't totally what I had in mind, but they if you're not able to express that, then someone like me on the other end trying to then work on that brief is sort of kind of trying to figure it out themselves. And if they haven't done that work with you, you're kind of really just guessing. We're not mind readers.
Oh, 100%. And I feel like obviously the more detailed, the better. So on the flip side, what is possibly like the biggest mistake that you see business owners doing when it comes to their copy?
I think it is really not having any sort of strategy in place. And you can sort of see that because they may be trying to, their Instagram post, for example, might be different. They're speaking differently in each post. They're not building a cohesive, brand, and no, you can't go to that page and really get a clear idea straight away of who they are, who they're speaking to. So I think, when you see some brands, they rush out there with, maybe a logo and just trying to go with things, but you can see sometimes there isn't that strategy behind it. And then when things aren't working, they maybe sort of wondering, well, I'll get increasingly frustrated and then just keeps bashing out more and more things, trying, different languages and, all sorts, but it's, they really need to stop and take a breath and actually go back to doing that foundational work, I think.
Yeah, I think that's very powerful because I'm dealing with a client who is like, I don't know how to make people know their presence. And I'm like, that's because you don't know your messaging.
Yeah, exactly. And that is really hard. That's what can be great about to work with someone who's, brand and PR strategist like myself or someone else is getting that sort of outside set of eyes on your business, people who are professional communicators and know how to speak to your audience and can often make your business even clearer to you. I've had a client recently who sort of sent through a few bits of copy that should sort of be her tagline, trying to really speak to her audience and the problem that she solves. And then she sort of said, oh, you've just actually made it also clear to me. Now I know what I'm meant to be doing on my Instagram because you've put it in these simple words that now, because she previously was sort of sending out various different messages and, it was all there, but she couldn't quite formulate and get that out. And sometimes it takes, a second set of eyes to really do that.
That's really cool. So we'd love to talk more about the PR side of stuff, because even for me, having, worked in the whole branding space, and even when I worked, did a bit of a project with Murdoch Uni, I was like, what is PR?
You're not the only one.
Yeah. And it really flies under the radar because people also
it does.
Merge it with marketing, or they merge it with comms, or they merge it with, I don't know. And so can you define what PR is for our lovely audience?
Yes. I mean, it's so typical of PR. We're professional communicators, but we're terrible at communicating ourselves, what we do. Mechanics are always driving bad cars. That's PR. Basically PR to me, it's, the management of how, a person or a brand is perceived and felt by others. So to me, it's all about feelings and that first initial feeling that might come with, hearing a name. So I always sort of like to think of it as, marketing and advertising is facts. That's, your benefits, your solutions, what you kind of really get from working with someone or buying a product, whereas PR is the feeling. So it's, say you might hear the name, Penfolds Grange, and you immediately think, oh, that's a special wine. You don't need to know what grape that was, how it was made, that it goes really well with your steak. You don't need to know any of that. You hear the name and you immediately think, oh, that's an upmarket special one. They're not going to write that on the label, we're upmarket, but it's the feeling that comes from what they've built up over the years with that brand. That is that immediate recognition and a positive feeling around the brand that sort of you can only really get from PR.
Yeah, wow. That's a good way of explaining it.
Yeah, that's I think there's often, a bit of a perception too with PR that, we're spin doctors and we're telling furfies, basically. But, we're not, to me, really good PR is about getting to the heart of a brand, building a narrative around that and then sharing that story. So it's true stories. And so it is, it's very tied to you. It's about the brand, not the products or services.
Yep. And so what kind of activities count as PR then? Because you mentioned a bit about Instagram copy, you mentioned about writing, I'm assuming for press releases and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Give us the spiel.
Again, it's probably why, a lot of people don't really know what PR is, because it does encompass so many things. I mean, I think I've seen a sort of quote recently that your average PR person is doing about 20 times more than what you think they are. So, at any one time we can be working on, brand positioning, might be strategic partnerships, might be, influencer partnerships, social media strategy, content marketing, like thought leadership, might be spokesperson ID, speech writing, and then, of course, there is the more sort of traditional, what you think of PR, which is the media relations and securing publicity, because like all of those things are ways that you communicate with the public, right? It's public relations. So they're all sending out a message about who you are as a brand.
Yeah.
All of those things. Yeah, so it is we're spread over a lot of areas.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're very busy.
Yeah. And can you give me a couple of examples of like say some like activities or stuff that you've done with clients? You don't have to specify their name if it's secret squirrel business, but just to give me some more context about like but basically how you kind of have helped with PR, because like I understand what you said and it's amazing, because like my mind's blowing up. I'm like, how do we not use this stuff? So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, because I think a lot of the time too is PR, it is one of those things, it's really hard to put like a monetary value on. It's not like an ad where someone might see an ad and or like on Instagram, click on it, go to the website, buy straight away, and you can really see that chain. PR doesn't really work in that same way. But I think it is really valuable. People need to sort of understand the value in it. So happy to speak to that, a little bit more. Because I think especially in that area of PR, as you're talking about like media relations and securing publicity. So that's what we call earned media, which you two probably, more have heard of, but for the sake of, those listening that won't. So that is basically your, appearing on your TV, radio, might be podcasts, magazine articles, anything like that. And that's, we call that earned media because, it's earned. So if someone outside of your business or a journalist decides that story is worth telling, then they tell it, you don't pay for it. Whereas an ad, say maybe a paid deal with an influencer, is more like exposure. So you pay for that, it's cash for coverage. So that, that both things you sort of need paid and earned media. The paid media is going to get you exposure, get your eyes on your business. But the earned media, which is what, why there's so much power in PR, is that gets you credibility, trust, and recognition. And those things, no ad's ever going to give you. So that's really the value in what a PR manager does. And, you're featured in, say, one podcast or one little news article is probably not going to transform your business overnight. But what that does, and I'm working on at the moment with the client to really raise her profile, is over time, the more you're featured, the more you're going up in people's sort of estimations, the more, the perception of you is building and growing and becoming really powerful. And then what we have at the end is you end up with what we call like the halo effect. So you're sitting there with this nice, pretty little halo around your head. And that means, people have a generally positive, good feeling about you. And so when you do, if you do make a mistake, they're more likely to forgive you, give you a second chance, or to just not even think you've made a mistake in the first place. So, I can think of, there's a recent example of that in the media playing out at the moment with Sandra Bullock. So she's someone who's always had great PR. She's always been quite down to earth. She's adopted children. She's recently been looking after her husband who's been really unwell. She's never really been involved in anything really controversial, been problematic. And Keanu Reeves loves her and everyone loves Keanu Reeves. So she's someone who sits there with this halo on her head, basically. So when news breaks recently that the film for which she won her Oscar, The Blind Side, that the family that was based on maybe weren't the saints that they were made out to be, and maybe didn't have the best interests of that boy that they adopted at heart, people straight away, the general public, like, well, don't come for Sandra, you know, like, don't take her Oscar away, you know, it's had nothing to do with her. It's, you know, it's not her fault. So she hasn't had to really address that story or make a statement in any way. Like, we've killed it for her. And that's the power of, that's because she's wearing that halo. And I mean, that halo can come off. You can look at, you know, Qantas right now, who've gone from being one of the, you know, most, you know, revered, like, brands in Australia, who, you know, a lot of pride was, you know, sat with Australians, you know, that was an Australian carrier, but they have made a series of PR blunders, and then, you know, that halo can come off, and now they're going to have to really work to build that trust back up. So that will be interesting to see how that plays out with Qantas over the next few years. Could be a good time to be a Qantas member or frequent flyer, because I think they'll be doing some damage control with and doing some really nice, some good customer programs. So
yeah, I feel like the Qantas one is a really good example of just what's happening in the media at the moment. And our friends of ours were talking about it the other day, and it's quite interesting. It will be quite interesting to see how they save face.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, they'll be, you know, leaning on that PR. Well, they always would, but yeah, certainly now. But I think, you know, a lot of times PR as well is described as, because we do so much work with that earned media, and it's all about trust and recognition. And building up your credibility, you know, so it's often described as like word of mouth on steroids, you know. So I always, you know, say to clients, like, there's a saying as well, you know, especially with restaurant clients, you should treat everybody that comes into your restaurant as though they are a restaurant critic. You know, you should, it's all about, it comes back down to, I think, your service. And if you genuinely care about, you know, your customers and your clients, and are delivering a really great service and are looking after them, you're just naturally going to have good PR. You're going to have naturally, like, good word of mouth. People are going to hear about you, and they're going to hear good things about you. So at the end of the day, you know, that's essentially what PR is, but just on another level.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's important not to forget that, you know, ever forget that your customer, your client, is like, they're your bread and butter, and the way you serve them is more important than anything else.
100%. Well, I suppose you look at, even from a small business perspective, referrals through word of mouth based on that experience.
Sorry, I just lost one of my little earpods. Sorry.
You're like,
I was like,
I had to take mine out, so don't worry. Just with referrals and word of mouth, and I know that I get work through word of mouth all the time, and it's about creating that client experience, and what people say about you when you leave the room, what people say about your business when you're not networking. So question, when it comes to the relationship between PR and branding, can you describe how they intertwine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be honest, as you could probably get a picture of that, they're very closely linked. I mean, a lot of the times that they're more or less one and the same. So a lot of companies, they might have your job title might be communications manager, and you basically are the brand and PR manager, and you're doing, you know, both of those things. Or, you know, bigger companies, they might have, you know, two or more people even in those roles, but they're going to work really closely together, your brand and PR manager, because, you know, as I said, PR is about your brand, not your products or services. So they're often part of forming that strategy of how we're going to, you know, what is the perception that we want people to have of us, and then how we're going to communicate that and tell that story. So very closely linked. Sorry, I just popped that back in again. But also as well, I often think of PR as like the gatekeeper of your brand. So PR is, you know, like that little angel on your shoulder that's going to tell you when something you're about to post isn't really true to you, or is of what we call off-brand. So that's why, you know, in a lot of businesses or companies, there can be a little bit of, you know, friendly jarring between, say, your social media manager and your PR manager, because, you know, the social media managers, you know, they want to be able to jump on trends and contribute to conversations and, you know, post that funny meme. And the PR person's often the one just being like, hang on, you know, that meme isn't really true to us. And, you know, I won't sort of jump on sides of who's right or who's wrong. I know sometimes, you know, social media managers can be frustrated because they do miss those opportunities then to to jump into conversations, but, you know, there can be a really good reason for that. The PR manager has for stopping you. I mean, they're trying to keep, you know, you telling the same story and to be building your brand. And it's hard to do that if people are jumping off and telling other stories, especially if they contradict what you're trying to do. I mean, I can think back to in the media, oh, gosh, this thing just keeps dropping. Maybe I'll just leave it.
Yeah, leave it.
Just leave it. Yeah, back to in the media where there was like a lot of hate being piled on Amber Heard. And there are a lot of, you know, sort of different memes and things going around about that. And I actually, you know, you saw a lot of businesses even jumping into that conversation and adding to it. And that's really where you want your PR manager to step in, because, you know, your social managers might be thinking, oh, it's just, you know, we're trying to add to the conversation or be part of something, or it's just a funny meme, you know, it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't matter. But your brand and PR manager is going to be the one to say, well, no, that's not a funny meme. That meme says, you know, we don't believe women, we don't value women, and that's not, you know, who we are. So that's, you know, your PR manager there is going to be the one that stops you from having to go into crisis communications and damage control. And then your PR manager is going to take over your social channels, and no one wants that, especially your PR manager. So, yeah. So that's why, yeah, it can be good to just have that little angel sitting there, just keeping you, you know, on track and telling your story. I mean, when I was at London Zoo, we had 2 zoos to talk about, hundreds of animals, really cool events, variety of events. We had conservation projects happening in 50 countries around the world. We had an Institute of Zoology right next to my office, doing all this groundbreaking, science. So yeah, no shortage of stories, incredible amount of, news to share and stories to tell. But our brand storytelling, that story was through everything, no matter what the story was, who the target audience was, because we had obviously like families visiting the zoo to like scientists and speaking to a lot of people. All the same story was being told every time, which was, our vision of a world where wildlife thrives. And so it didn't matter what we were doing, we were telling the same story, maybe just in different words, in a different language, but the same story was being told every time. And that's what, your power of, your brand is, just to be consistent like that. And that is how you build up a really powerful brand and get that recognition and get that, like with the Penfolds Grange, where they hear your name and they immediately know who you are, what you stand for, and have a feeling around you. So yeah, that's the power, I think, of PR and brand, really one and the same sometimes.
Yeah, I love it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like you can obviously use PR for like encouraging like a positive way for your branding. Have you ever had to deal with like a client or like a situation? Don't have to specify, where you've had to like kind of go, we've got to, I don't know, check this and damage control, or not to that extent, but have you ever had a situation where you've kind of like, oh, that's a bit risky, we didn't think that? I know you've mentioned like Amber Heard as an example, but yeah.
I mean, nothing, I've been lucky, touch wood, nothing like sort of like that Amber Heard example, for instance, but certainly when, sometimes even things happen outside of your control, that you have to respond to, that can damage a reputation. So certainly in some prior jobs being, part of things like, and I mean, I think all of us too, even an example recently is like, when COVID happens and still companies are having to communicate through that crisis, and, especially places that, weren't able to open, or for whatever reason, everyone's suddenly having to pivot and change. So that is definitely a version of crisis comms as well. So definitely, I mean, I think, PRA can help you actually avoid getting into a crisis if you communicate properly to begin with, or don't post something that is going to upset people. But, when that does happen, that's when you are really going to want to lean on your PR team to help you navigate through that crisis. And again, I think it really comes down to communication. And I think now, people are we're a lot more sort of switched on to brands, and things have to be authentic. And that is also, I think, with PR, it's meant to look and feel organic and authentic, and you can't really get away with not being authentic these days. We're a bit smarter than that. So you do, I think, often need to, address it. Obviously, you're going to want to do that, lean on your PR manager to do that and do it in the smart way. But yeah, it's hard to get away these days with just ignoring things and hoping that they'll go away. You really
definitely don't.
No, like address it, apologize if it's something that you have to apologize for, be genuine. And I think, yeah, again, like sort of like with Qantas, remember that your customer is the most important person and that they are the reason you exist. So you're going to want to be, depending on what your crisis is, like rebuilding that trust. If you've damaged it, that's going to be, top of your to-do list. The only thing on your to-do list is going to be rebuilding that trust. And that's something your PR manager obviously can help you with.
Yeah, 100%. So I feel like commonly, PR, it's like a held opinion that PR is just for big companies. Like I know when I think of PR, I was like, we mentioned media and all that sort of stuff. And, it's when they've got news to share, or product releases, or maybe they're going through a restructure. Remember my old corporate job, every time we went through a restructure, we had to announce it to the world and stakeholders, everything. Do you believe that PR has a role to play in small to medium businesses as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, essentially, PR is about telling your story. To me, that's what I think, and we all should be doing that. Small businesses, in particular. There's so many great opportunities out there. You don't have to, be on the cover of, the New York Times or be having these massive big news to share. It's all about just building your presence and positioning yourself as a thought leader in your industry. The more you're featured, that's also going to be great for your website SEO. Like when people Google some, a service in your industry, you're going to be the one that pops up because you're featured in the media. It's absolutely a really powerful way for small businesses to be sharing their story. You don't need to be shooting for, even in Australia, like, The Project or Sunrise Today Show, Vogue magazine. You don't need to be, obviously great they're always looking for people, for stories to tell. So why not? But you certainly don't have to. There's so many niche little publications and podcasts that are going to have a really engaged audience and be really interested in what you have to say. So, I always say, to a lot of clients, it's quality, not quantity, as with everything else. Appearance on a podcast that's very specific to your industry can be wonderful for you. You don't need to, hit the big time news, especially if that's something you're not, comfortable with, but, you can work towards that. But yeah, absolutely has a lot of power for SMEs. And yes, it is something as well. We often think of PR as being really expensive, and a lot of time, it is, especially if you're working with a PR agency. You can actually do it yourself. You just need to learn, some sort of concept, which, I'd be happy to dive into, but that probably might have to be like another session, little PR lesson. I was speaking to a networking group the other day about how that, business owners can sort of drive their own PR. So it's certainly something that you can do, but you do need to get really clear on what your story is, and because that's what you're going to be doing, is telling your story. Get comfortable doing that. Even practice on your own channels. Use your, blogs, or if you have a podcast, do that. Or and then you can be sharing that obviously on your social media. But definitely be building your own presence in the channels that you own. If you're doing that, it's not unheard of. I hear several instances where you might post something, you don't know who's watching, right?
Yes.
Post something on your Facebook or Instagram, and that ends up in the hands of media, and you're talking on Channel 10 News about it that night because they found it really interesting. Just don't, forget about, I've heard of a couple of instances of things, like that happening. I know there was a guy, I think he posted something to do with, the building industry in New South Wales, which obviously has been going through similar troubles to what we have in WA, Alicia. And, I think someone from Sunrise, I think it was, just happened to see the post and thought, he had something really interesting to say about it. And he was speaking on Sunrise or whichever show it was about. And then he was like a regular for like 6 months. Whenever they wanted to talk about the building, industry, he was back. So if you get like a small opportunity in media and you do really well, are really helpful, the media are going to remember you and they'll ask you back next time. So it's not impossible to do yourself, and there's great power in doing it. And really, if you are doing it yourself as well, the investment is your time. As I said, this is earned media. It's you're not paying to get this coverage. It's just your time to get really clear on your story and be pitching to media.
Mm-hmm. So in regards to some of the PR activities you've mentioned, obviously there's podcasts, there's social media on all the platforms. I'm presuming writing into magazines. So what, as a small business owner, where would I start? What would be, should I be writing blogs? Should I be trying to get onto guest podcasts? Like, what's obviously knowing my story, once I've known my story, what would you say is like maybe the best, or your recommendation on a starting point?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a start as well, make sure you're consuming the media that, if even in your industry, be a regular listener of the podcasts or the magazines that you want to be on. So be a consumer, be part of the community, get really familiar on how the sort of stories that they feature and how they work. That's only going to help you land your pitch. But I think definitely, obviously social media is great, but I think, experimenting with, those sort of longer form blogs, or if you have a podcast or being a guest on someone else's podcast, just allows you to dive a little bit deeper into your story and to really share your expertise than you sort of can in a simple social media post, where again, you're also competing with people only reading a little bit and scrolling on through. I think just experiment with telling your own story and get really comfortable doing that. I mean, it's practice makes perfect, right? So just give it a go.
I love that. I think,
I think podcasts are probably, are a good one, especially if, a lot of people are scared of the media and, understand, think, oh, it'll be scary to be on TV. Like, podcast is an easy way to sort of, be more, practicing speaking, and it's a bit less high pressure than having TV cameras pointing at you. That's, for sure. But just start small and work your way up.
So I've got a follow-on question from that, because we've spoken a bit about like crafting your story, and I don't know, sometimes it's like, oh, my story's not that interesting. Do you ever have clients come to you and they're like, yeah, no one really wants to hear my story? Like,
all the time.
Yeah. So it's almost like it's like a mindset barrier or a barrier to, because I know I get nervous with my own story, but I also do believe that no one is like you. No one can replicate your business, all that sort of stuff. So how do you help your clients work through that?
Yeah, I mean, I hear that all the time, because, we all, deal with that. Few of us really think we've got this amazing story, but we do. Like you said, everybody's got a story, and your ideal clients and customers, they want to hear it. And the media are really interested in it too. And I think that's the beauty of PR, is that I had this conversation with a client recently, and I was sort of speaking to her about the vision and where I could sort of see her, sort of places I was planning on pitching her for. I said, I can see you, having a regular column in like the Sunday Times magazine. And she straight away was like, no way, like I'm 46. I could never have, I'm not at that level. I could never have a column in a magazine. And I was like, yes, you can, like, because I can see the potential. And I think that's, the beauty of working with, like a good PR or the right PR manager for you, is they sort of see the biggest version of you without that filter of your inner critic. So, listen to them. And as I was saying too, you don't need to have that PR manager. You can obviously, drive your own PR, but you have to believe that you belong in the pages of that magazine. I think that's what I've often said, even start small. Think about where you're really of value. It's all about you're helping the journalists out, because they've always got stories that they need to cover, places that they need to fill, and really think about how you're of service to their audience. So it's not about when you say are pitching to be on a podcast, the pitch isn't what's in it for you or even what's in it for the person, hosting the podcast. It's what actually is in it for the listener. Mm-hmm. So how are you of service to them? What do they, after listening to the episode of the podcast, what do they walk away with? Mm-hmm. Is it new information or perspective or a new way to do something? Or maybe it's, just a nice, warm, fuzzy story and they walk away with their faith in humans renewed. We don't know what it is. We all have a different business, but think about how you're of value. And I think that can maybe flick that switch into thinking, well, I'm actually doing this to help people, not to be the center of the story and to, all about me, which, the media isn't that. But I think if some people have that perception, actually think about that by doing that and being, telling your story, you're actually being of service.
I love that. Take up space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, take up space. We want to hear your story. It might help us. So,
oh, I really like that, and I like the. Before I ask you what I was going to ask you, I thought about the fact that it's the collaborative approach. If you think about it, having that external person, or even asking people, or I can just see there's a lot of collaborative approach.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you find that in what you've done? Where does that kind of sit in? Because that's all I get.
Yeah, it is very collaborative, and I love that it is. I don't want to go lock myself in a room and try and tell someone's story without them. I need to know their story, so I need to get to know them. So yeah, it's definitely collaboration. I always, when I'm working on a media strategy or pitch for someone, definitely always having conversations. I'll always send them, this is what I'm sort of thinking. This is, after I've heard that story, and talk through that pitch and how sort of I'm going to present that story and make sure it's something that they're comfortable with and they're happy with. And, a lot of time, of course, they do totally trust you, and they often see it and think, yes, actually you love it. That's exactly, exactly right. But it's got to be a collaboration. You want, me and my client, we're on the same team, and you're working together. So yes, not sort of just handballing and just running with it. I'd definitely like to work with people where we're always, having conversation and making magic together.
Yeah, that's cool. So a follow on then is how, because I know you mentioned about how it's hard to monetize. Obviously, you said advertising and marketing, you can sort of follow the bread trail crumbs,
Yeah.
So how can you recommend you measure a campaign success? You obviously say doing one thing is not going to be the catapulting thing, but it sets it in that sphere, and it starts obviously elevating your profile and your reputation. So how do you go about measuring the campaign success or the PR success? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, as I said, it's something we're always, dealing with in PR, because, you don't hear, say, a radio mention or even watch a TV show and be able to click on that link. So it is hard to narrow it down to that one thing. You're not going to stop all of your other promotions and just put something out like that. So, it is very hard to put a monetary value in it. I mean, what's the value of having a really trustworthy brand? I mean, I think that's huge. We know how important that is to consumers now. But, in terms of having a figure that is tough, I mean, there is ways, we often show that because we've often got that coverage for free, and you can compare that to what it would have cost that person to put an ad in that was that length or was that many pages, and the cost is huge. So, in terms of the value, the monetary value there of what it would have cost to get in front of that many eyes, we can sort of demonstrate a bit of that. But it is hard to see, and we often say as well, that's not really how the media works. It is about building your perception and building your credibility and your trust. You're featured in one media article. As I said, your phone's not going to start ringing. It's not going to blow up after one, I mean, it might, but that's not how media really works. We're trying to basically raise a profile. And so I think, you want to be working with the right sort of clients that understand, what we're actually trying to achieve with that, and then it'll all come back to you tenfold once we achieve that. But and as I said, it's something businesses, especially small businesses, can be doing themselves, just be really working away at building that trust and credibility. And I'm sure, they certainly notice if they've been featured and then have a bunch of inquiries. They can obviously be trying, to pinpoint there. But yeah, it is a tough part of PR is demonstrating the value. And we do live in such a world that is so wants that answer and that, that solution and just that money, just coming back straight away. But yeah, in terms of, ROI with PR, I mean, you've got it for free, and then it's just all value added on top of that. So one of the highest, I think, return on investments in terms of that, because your investment isn't huge, it's your time investment. If you're doing it for free. Obviously, if you're working with a PR agency, you're going to be paying the agency fee, but if not, if you're a smaller business and working away to yourself, or working with agencies that do not quite have as huge fees as some of them because they want to work with those smaller businesses, then yeah, it can be huge return.
I suppose it's that feeling, right? Like it goes back to that as well. Like when you're talking about that, I think about you can't really quantify a feeling. Like I can relate it to when I send like visual brand identity stuff and people go, oh, and they get a feeling. I don't know what they get. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. And it's emotive. Yeah.
Yeah. It's some things you cannot, and you're dealing with people. So that's that relational aspect, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's hard to quantify. And it's, I mean, it's like you would have seen there's that famous cartoon where it's the 4 different sort of parts of, marketing, as the marketing person saying, I'm this, like trying to talk to someone, and then the advertiser saying the same thing several times, and they're just talking at the person. And then PR is someone else, a third party, coming up to the person saying, hey, you can trust what, this is what he's saying. And branding is the person that all those people have been trying to reach, just coming up to you themselves of their own accord and saying, hey, I know this about you, I want to work with you. And that's the power of branding. You're getting that feeling out there and people are getting to know who you are without you having to really tell them yourself or shout it down their throats. They just get that feeling and know, they have what I want.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you have any favorite PR campaigns that you've seen or worked on that our audience might recognize? I like this question.
Yeah. I feel like my answer is probably going to be a popular one that probably a lot of people have said, but definitely Barbie.
Yes.
But not for, I think a lot of people, there was a lot of talk about, the Barbie marketing, and because they were everywhere, and which of course they were. So we all heard about the movie. The marketing campaign was amazing. But for me, it was, it was the PR and the branding. It was how they were able to completely flip Barbie's story and the perception we had of her with 5 words. So that slogan they had for the movie, she's everything, he's just Ken. And you can see people straight away like, I've said a version of those words every time I've met a friend's boyfriend. It was, they immediately, they were speaking directly to us, to their sort of target audience. And so Barbie really went from being, we had this perception of her as being, very superficial, the damage that she'd done to women's self-esteem over the years. I think we all heard how she was so out of proportion that if she was a real woman, she wouldn't even be able to stand up. So that was what we all thought of Barbie. And then with those 5 words, I mean, there was no new logo for Barbie, no nothing. It was still the same pink. Just with those words, with that, they told a story in 5 words and flipped it to suddenly, actually, Barbie's amazing. She, she's been a race car driver. She's president. She's, all these amazing things. And that was just 5 words, and they completely flipped that. I mean, that's why I think most of us, we all flocked to the cinema to see that, not because we saw pink everywhere, but because we saw that story everywhere, and completely, changed the perception. I mean, I know there's still, and even with myself, a bit of, you know, conflicting feelings about Barbie, but they still succeeded in flipping that story. And, you know, I mean, they've made what, $1 billion more out of it. So it's a story that worked. We all wanted to hear.
Yeah. It was an amazing, like the marketing campaign obviously was amazing. It said that slogan, I know. I was at a Barbie movie, I don't know about that, and I went, and I didn't realize probably what I was walking into, and then after watching it I was like, damn, they completely changed everything that Barbie represented to us as children. It was a little bit of magic. It really was.
Yeah, it was. And I mean, they completely, I think, so with those 5 words and with that story, completely rebranded for a new generation.
Yes.
Like, they couldn't get away with the old story of Barbie anymore. Like, that doesn't fly. We're not interested in that. We don't want to hear it. And, you know, Mattel, they knew that. They got the right people on board, Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig. And they've completely changed the story. And I'm sure now there are going to be parents probably buying Barbie for their, you know, daughters again who weren't. So
I believe they started selling out, and I suppose it's giving it a brand new perception of what Barbie stands for children.
I tried to really tell that story of, you know, how much truth there was to this or not, but, you know, leaning on the fact that, which I think is before Barbie, you know, girls just had baby dolls to play with. So the only option for
that
was
opening scene.
Was to become mothers. And then Barbie come in and they suddenly had this adult doll who had all these different jobs to play with. So they, with that story, effectively turned her into a feminist icon when she had been an enemy to feminism. So I think the 180 of that branding, just doing such a, with 5 words, that story, sort of blew my mind. I was like, that was a job well done, Greta Gerwig.
Yeah, they'll be studying that for years to come, right?
For sure, Yes, for sure. I mean, I was never a Barbie girl growing up. I never really loved Barbies, but I went to see the film. So she spoke to me with those words. So I feel like it's one of those movies you then have to go watch again, right? Because there's a lot of messaging in there that was definitely. There's a lot of messaging. It was one of those movies, I think I've sort of like continued to think about. Even like after I thought, actually they could have done this differently. And they're like, oh no, actually they couldn't have. No, it had to be that way. I would love to watch it again and take it in.
Yeah, definitely. Well, in a slightly different, more in your line of work, off Barbie words. So we know you specialize in the travel and hospitality industry. And we'd like to, could you give us some examples, or are there any challenges or considerations that you really have to work with your clients on within that industry when you have to keep in mind? Is there any nuances or anything like that?
Look, I mean, I think a lot of the challenges are challenges across the board, probably in a lot of industries. So I try not to get really siloed into, well, this is a tourism or this is a wine brand, has to be a certain way, or there's these sort of challenges. I mean, brand storytelling is brand storytelling, no matter the industry. There certainly is a very highly competitive, market, and typically, your profit margins, maybe aren't as wide as with other industries. So certainly there are those sort of challenges and concerns. So I think it makes, it's more important to make sure those brands are really telling that story. I mean, for example, you look down at Margaret River here in WA, I think there's more than 100 or like hundreds of cellar doors. All beautiful. It's a beautiful wine region. They're all making beautiful wine. So why should I visit your cellar door and not the one next door? When you have that much competition, it's not enough that you're just making great wine. They all are. So they need to be telling that story, and how do they make great wine, or what makes their wine, different? What's the story people, want to hear? And that's what's going to put them to the top of someone's list next time they go.
Okay, it's like that. It's like the origin story that creates
I think
the
so.
connection.
We want to, we want to, we all know that saying, people buy from people. So I always, want to get that story out of people. Like, don't necessarily tell me how you make the wine, but tell me why you started the winery, or what's the story here. That's the kind of stuff people really want to see. And I do think that earned media then is really powerful as well. The way I sort of often think about it is, as I said, that paid media, that ads, are great. Like, you can be scrolling on your phone, see maybe as a paid, sponsored post from an influencer about, a new wine bar. And you might think, oh, cool, like, hadn't heard of that wine bar. Now they exist, which is great. They get added to, your list of, I don't know about anyone else, but I've probably got about a dozen or more wine bars that I'd like to try. And now they're on the list because I've heard of them. So great. Few days later, open up the Sunday Times, see the Sunday Times magazine, and I see Simon Collins here in Perth, who's the food critic. He's been to that wine bar and given it 18 out of 20, raved about the service, raved about, how good the food was there, how helpful the sommelier was. So now I'm like, oh, now I know it exists, and now I know it's good. Now it's at the top of my list. I'm making a booking. I'm going to go on the weekend. So I think that's that power of that credibility, that sort of earned coverage.
Oh, I love that. I love that so much. So, question, I feel like we're a little bit past it now, but the good old the good old pandemic, obviously within the travel and hospitality industry, it was probably pretty hectic for some of your clients, and whether they were closed for the for that season, or the impacts that they suffered. How did PR, brand strategy, like your work, support them in either making a comeback or even through that period of time?
Yeah, I mean, so I hadn't gone freelance actually in the pandemic, so I was in a role. So I was working at Crown Perth here in WA when the pandemic hit. So it's obviously one of the state's biggest hospitality.
Not tiny.
Tourism, yeah. But of course, hugely affected by the pandemic. So, I mean, I was part of a team of people then. There was, well, how do we keep telling Crown's story when people can't come? So, yes, that pivot. And it all came down to, again, we keep saying this word, but still telling that story. So I think we had this whole campaign, which was live a little at home. Like the Crown slogan was live a little at Crown. We had live a little at home, and it was ways you could live that Crown lifestyle or life from your living room. So, yeah, I think people still want to hear those stories no matter what's sort of going on. It's just pivoting the way you tell them and still connecting with people. We can't predict when something like that's going to happen. So you're bound to be affected. But, yeah, you still just need to tell your story.
On that, have you come across any particular stories that you've met either personally through people or through like your different roles or different projects you've worked on that's really like stood out that you're like, wow, you can't even make that stuff up? Like,
as in... maybe just repeat it again for me.
Okay. As in, like, we're talking about stories, right? And telling the person's story or telling that business story. And has there been, throughout your career, any real key highlight, like, rememberable stories that you're like, wow, that's amazing. You cannot, you can't even make that up. That's like... Wow. Does that make sense?
Like people's story, yeah. I mean, I've heard a lot of amazing stories. I mean, I'm sort of thinking of one now, but I'm not sure if I should share it because it is sort of a client. And we're still sort of working on the process. But I think lots of people have a great story. It's hard to think of like who's ever had the best story or who's, we're all human and we've all led amazing, very varied, lives up to here. So, I think it comes kind of a little bit back down to what you were saying before, is people like not feeling like they have a great story when, we do all have a story in here. and we just need to let it out, because probably what I've thought was an amazing story, others, wouldn't.
Yeah.
But your audience is out there for sure. I mean, I've told my story on my website, so I felt like I had to do, work in brand storytelling. I'm asking people to, help me tell their story. I need to tell my story. So I wrote a blog, I think it was Welcome to Jess Foley Communications, where I told my story. And, that did feel really scary and vulnerable to do. So I understand where people do hesitate to do that. And I thought, what am I even worried about? I don't feel like I even have this big dramatic story. It's just a story about a girl gallivanting around the world who likes travel, But it did still feel vulnerable to put that out. And, I think a lot of people did write to me, and they did love the story, even though, as I said, I didn't really feel like it was that dramatic. So
I loved it because after my own heart, traveling and I don't know, like dodging David Attenborough in the hallways, and
people do. People always point that part out to me. Everyone loves David Attenborough. I was like, I know this is going to be a good name to mention in this story.
Drop that in there.
Yeah.
It resonated with me very much. So, I suppose that speaks volumes to sharing that story.
Yeah, exactly. Like you don't know what's going to resonate and who it's going to resonate with, and I think there's just so much power in telling your story. I mean, it's scary to do, but once you do it, it is a great feeling. It's very freeing. Can let your creative juices flow. You might even find stories in you that you didn't know you had.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I didn't really think my story was dramatic, but then as I was writing it, I was like, whew. Just do it.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. So within your industry or in in general, do you have any dream clients in like you're like, yes, that would be fantastic?
So many dream clients. I mean, I'd love to work with, some fantastic wineries, because I feel like they combine so many of my passions. I mean, a lot of them, there might be accommodation. So they, they have that tourism component, and they're in beautiful regions. A lot of them, might have a restaurant on site and do great food. And then there's, of course, the wine, and there's just so many stories to tell. So wineries are definitely up there. Other than that, I just want to work with really great people. I mean, I would love to, I have visions of having, clients like up in the beautiful top end of WA up there. Like I love Broome. People doing really fantastic things and like celebrating our country, our state, but also caring for it, looking after it. Like scenic flight operator up in, Broome area or somewhere up there doing cool things. Anyone listening to this who's working in Broome, just let me know.
This is the call out to Broome.
Yeah.
I'm going to be coming up there to visit you all the time though if you're a client. I think, quite simple. Just want to be able to, going around the whole state, working with, amazing people.
That's fantastic. And I think, WA has such, so much beauty, so much, like you talked about wineries up north, even the Kimberleys are fantastic. It's really cool. So, and, you're lucky, and you've traveled around, obviously, around the world. Different places.
Yeah, so you believe me when I say WA is great. I've seen a bit.
Yeah, that's right. But so speaking of dreams and everything, we're gonna start to wind up our conversation, even though I love what we're talking about. So what are your long-term dreams or like plans for Jess Foley Communications? Like, even if it's just the next year, or what's your focus?
I mean, I'd love to, obviously my business is quite new. So my focus at the moment is just, really getting myself out there. I want to meet some fantastic people and work with some fantastic people. I'd love to get around the state. I don't want to have all my clients in Perth. Ideally, I'd love to be able to be spending a bit of time up north or going down south and moving around. Obviously, that's the traveller in me. But I think longer term, like obviously being, one woman band, there's only so many clients I can take on. So I would love to get to a point where, I could maybe be traveling and going up to the Kimberley, for example, and just be educating, the tourism and hospitality providers there about how they can drive their own PR and be trying to reach more people and really create more change, in that way, and have the biggest impact I can as one person. So that's, maybe slightly like longer term, but that's where I can imagine myself doing something like that.
Oh, I love that. Something it's sharing knowledge. Sharing knowledge gives me goosebumps. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. I don't imagine myself having, sorry to cut you off, but like,
no, you're right.
just, hiring more and more people and creating this big agency of, that Jess Foley community. That's not really me. I think, that's, the business is branded to my name. I want my clients when they work with me to work with me. So definitely not probably about growing in that way as big as I can. But if I could have the biggest impact I can while being one woman, then that would be ideal for me.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, it's been so good to have you on the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. So where can our listeners, viewers find you?
On the website, so it's www.jessfoley.au, and also on Instagram @JessFoleyAU. And I think on LinkedIn as well, it's the same, like /JessFoleyAU. You'll find me. So that's all. That's where I am at the moment. No other channels. Just focusing there. Baby steps.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, that was fantastic. You're amazing, Jess.
Thanks, shucks. Hopefully you did okay.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's really interesting because, like, when you're talking about that feeling, I understand. I understand. And people can't. I think people who've got like a finance background or have finance, whatever, but has more like that kind of very technical background, I don't think they can comprehend that PR side of things. I'm just thinking about the type of person, they've got to.
Yeah, they would all, it would all be having an effect on them. They just sort of don't know. Like I said, it's when you hear that name, Penfolds Grange, and we all go, oh, that's a nice wine.
That's so fancy.
Without having to hear another word about it.
So it's very subtle, but
yes,
cool.
Very organic.
Yeah, definitely. Yay! Well, there you go. We're finished.
Success.
Yeah, with success. Everyone's
a couple of tech issues with my.
I think you have to go find your ears.
Yeah.
I'm very not a tech person. I don't have AirPods. I just bought these the other day.
No, you did so well. Don't worry.
Yeah, you're great. I think it gives context as well, and I love that it spotlights WA. Sorry, Jess Hallett there. She's in Melbourne.
I just need to move to Perth. I think that's what I've decided to do.
Yes. So I like it. And we're talking about potentially having Australian-made brands, like a section. So I like the spotlight of that, which is cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We were literally just talking about, having a section for Australian-made. What we love about like having Australian brands that really represent community and sharing and getting involved and all that sort of stuff with those unique stories.
Yeah. Fantastic.
We should maybe have those origin stories. Interesting. Yeah.
Very cool.
You got us thinking.
I know, right? I feel like we're going to walk away with more homework than what we started with.
Yeah. I'm writing notes now. No.
Really, I hope it was helpful, and I hope you're a little bit more clear on PR. It is something that, as I said, we're terrible at explaining, and it's so varied that I feel like we often don't even know what it is that we're doing. But
there's so much
hopefully
involved.
Very involved. So I'm still learning.
Can I ask? I don't think I asked this, but how did you get into PR? Like, did you start in the brand strategy space and then go into PR? How did you
No, I mean, I always wanted to be a writer. I used to love writing as a kid. I remember when my parents got a computer for the first time, and I'd run in there and open up Word and just be like writing, started writing a book with chapters and everything. So yeah, I wanted to be a journalist. So I moved to Sydney straight after my degree with the intention of becoming a journalist. But I fell into a job at a place called Trav Media, which is like we call it like the LinkedIn of just the travel media world. So the travel PR managers on the site using it, and travel writers and journalists, and we sort of used to host events and basically connect the two. And that's why I really actually fell in love with PR. I often would be speaking to our clients, our PR managers, and found it so interesting them talking about sort of projects they were working on, the clients they got to work with. And that's when I really learned too that often the PR manager is the one telling the story. The other one being really creative and like spending that time with the client and pulling the story out of the client and handing it on a silver platter to the journalist, who just grabs it and puts it then in, like the journalist doesn't have time to spend that time with the client and to do that. They just have to feel stories. So yeah, I think that's the first time I was just kept feeling myself being pulled the other way to the other side of the media landscape, which there are a lot of PR managers that way that start out either wanting to be journalists or actually as journalists and then end up on the other side. So yeah, that was really why it was the way for me.